The father could no longer even provide daily bread for them.
What are we going to do? How can I support my family when I can't even support ourselves?
I have a wonderful idea. Tomorrow, first thing in the morning, we'll take the children to the thickest part of the forest. There we will leave them and they will starve.
How could I do such a thing? I can't leave my own children in the woods to starve.
Oh, you fool. Then we'll all starve.
She gave him no peace until he agreed.
Very well. I do feel sorry for them, though.
The two children had not been able to sleep either, for they were so hungry, and they heard what their stepmother had said.
Oh, Hansel, don't worry. We're going to find a way out.
The next morning, as the sun rose, the woman went and woke the two children.
Get up, you lazy bones. We're going to the forest to cut wood.
Then she gave them each a little piece of bread.
Here's your dinner. Don't eat it now, because that's all you're going to get.
Gretel put the bread in her apron. Then they all started out together on their way to the forest. After they had been walking for a little while, Gretel paused and looked back at the house, and she did this again and again. Her father said,
Gretel, why do you keep looking backward?
Oh, Dad, don't worry. It's just a little cat on the roof of our house. It wants to say goodbye to me.
But Gretel had not been looking back at a cat. Every time she stopped, she had dropped onto the path a breadcrumb to mark their way through the forest. Finally, they arrived in the middle of the woods.
Now gather some wood, children, and I will build you a fire so that you do not get cold.
Hansel and Gretel pulled together brushwood until it was high as a mountain.
Now lie down and get some rest. We're going into the forest to cut wood. But don't worry, we'll be back for you.
Hansel and Gretel sat by the fire. Since they heard the blows of their father's axe, they thought that he was nearby. But it was not the axe. It was actually a branch that he had fastened to a dead tree so that the wind would blow it back and forth. They had been sitting there a long time, and they got so tired that their eyes closed and they fell fast asleep. When they woke up, it was pitch black.
Oh no. Now how are we ever going to get out of the forest? Oh, don't worry. When the moon comes up, we're going to follow a trail of breadcrumbs that I left.
When the moon rose, they started out, but they did not find any crumbs, for the birds that fly from the tree to tree had picked them all up. They found nothing, and they walked all night until the very break of dawn. But they still could not find their way out of the forest. To eat, they had only a few berries that they found on the ground, and they kept getting deeper and deeper into the woods. When it was noon, they saw a beautiful snow-white bird, who sang so beautifully that they had to stop and listen. When he finished singing, he flew away. Until they came to a little house, and as they got closer, they saw that it was made of food. The roof was made of gingerbread, and the windows were made out of sugar cane.
to work on that and have a real feast.
Hansel broke off a little bit of the roof, and Gretel went to the window and nibbled at it. Then a voice called from inside the house.
Nibble, nibble, little mouse. Who is gnawing at my house?
It is not I, it is not I, it is the wind, the child of the sky.
So they went on eating without stop. The roof tasted awfully good to Hansel, and he tore off a great big piece of it. And Gretel pushed out a whole window pane and really enjoyed it. Then the door opened up, and a little old woman leaning on crutches came creeping out. They were so frightened that they dropped the food from their hands.
Oh, you poor dear children. What has brought you here? Come inside and stay with me.
Though they were frightened, she took them by the hand and led them into her little house. And then she set before them a veritable feast. There was milk, and pancakes with sugar, and apples and nuts. After they had had their fill, she led them to two tiny little beds, and they thought that they were in heaven. But the old woman had only pretended to be friendly. She had only built the house of bread to lure them inside. Early the next morning, she seized Hansel out of his sleep and shook Gretel until she awoke. Then she threw Hansel into a cage and locked him in, and she turned to Gretel and said,
Now fetch me some water and cook your brother a nice meal. When he's good and fat, I'm going to eat him.
Gretel had to do what the evil old lady had told her. Now that the finest food was cooked for poor Hansel, Gretel had nothing to eat but crab shells. Every morning, the woman would walk out to the cage.
Stick out your finger, Hansel. I want to see how fat you're getting.
But clever Hansel would stick out a bow, and the old woman, who was nearly blind, could not understand why he never got any fatter. 4 weeks went by, and Hansel still seemed as thin as ever, until the old woman could not take it any longer.
Gretel, fetch some water. Whether he's fat or thin, I will eat your brother tonight.
Dear Gaia, save us.
She went out to fill the kettle with water and to light a fire in the oven.
But first, we'll bake.
The old lady pushed poor Gretel up to the oven, where there were flames shooting out.
Now get inside and see if it's hot enough.
But is the oven too small? How can I even get in?
Goose, goose. It's not too small. Even I can fit in.
And she stuck her head up to the oven, but Gretel gave her a great big push, and she fell right in, and Gretel shut the door on her. Oh, then the witch began to howl, and Gretel ran away as the evil old woman burned to death. She ran to the cage and let Hansel out. He sprang out, and they danced and threw their arms together and kissed. Then they looked around the house, and in every corner they saw that there were pearls and precious gemstones. They filled their pockets with as many pearls and stones as they could.
Now let's get out of this enchanted forest and find our way home.
They set out into the woods, and soon they were in an area that kept looking more and more familiar, until at last, in the distance, they saw their father's house. Then they started to run, and their father burst out the door, and they threw themselves on him.
Oh, it's so good to see you. I missed you so much.
It turned out that he was very regretful for leaving them in the woods, and so they gave him the pearls and the precious gemstones, and all of their troubles were over, and they lived together